Welcome back, everyone, to the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Derek Williams. Excited to be with you today. Have kind of some fun news and an experience that I want to share. So I have settled down. We've purchased and closed on a home that has bricks. In the RV world, those that travel full time call it a sticks and bricks home. So we're settling down, moving into the next phase of life after almost 2 years. Yeah, like 22 months living in an RV, traveling around the United States. So we're excited. It's been a lot of fun so far, and we're really looking forward to this phase. Um, I know Steve and I are planning on recording an episode or two, kind of talking about our experiences in taking a break after selling our practices and kind of traveling and stuff. So that will be fun to do that. So I'll talk more about that in another episode or two with Steve. But just to share a really quick insight on something that's kind of interesting or fun. The other day, I really like protein bars. I probably have at least two a day. And so I was ordering some protein bars the other day, and it was like it was the most interesting experience because every time I've ever bought protein bars in the last couple months or the last couple years, it's always been like, okay, how many boxes can I get? And I honestly have been storing the protein bars next to my bed in the RV. Like I have a little spot where I would put my protein bars. When we would move on travel days, the bed slides in, so I would have to put those on top of my bed to slide it in. So I've always had that in the back of my mind, like, okay, how many boxes can I buy? And this last week when I ordered protein bars, I was like, I can buy however many I want. I'm not limited on space and storage. And so there's been several instances of a feeling like that, of just kind of the feeling of like, oh wow, I've kind of had to rewire my brain over the past couple years to manage this space and figure out how to make this doable. And now that constraint has been lifted. And so it's interesting to kind of experience life in different ways and pros and cons, which, Steve and I will talk about, that will be a lot of fun. But today's episode, I want to share an experience that I had. I was on a flight recently from Phoenix to Seattle, and I got on my flight and sat down next to a guy, and the guy's eyes looked kind of like hazy, kind of like what someone that was blind might look like. So, but it's hard to know. I didn't want to assume, so I sat down next to him. I had some kind of food that I had gotten, and I think I started eating it, and he's like, "Oh, that smells good. What is it?" And I told him and stuff, and I said, "Are you blind?" And he said, "Yeah, I am." And then what ensued from there was a really fun and entertaining experience for me to be able to just ask this guy questions. And so I'm going to share some of the questions that I asked, some of what I learned, and how I think his experience is very relatable and translates into practice ownership. So the first question I asked, honestly, of course, was like, well, okay, tell me about it. Have you been blind your whole life? How long has this happened? How long have you been blind, basically? And he told me that he said, I think if I remember right, he said 3 years ago, um, I had perfect eyesight. I had nothing going on, anything like that. Um, and then he said he started getting bad eyesight in one eye. It was progressing relatively rapidly. He went in, he saw a specialist, and they told him that he had an aggressive form of macular degeneration, and that he probably was going to lose his eyesight, the majority of it within 12, 18, 24 months, something like that. And that's basically exactly what happened. Over 1 year, he went through an experience where he lost the majority of his eyesight, and and now most of what he can see is um, light. He can make out some colors and stuff like that, but he can't really see any definition or anything like that. So it was really interesting because at first I was kind of thinking like, man, what a crappy thing to be dealt in life. And this guy's name is Steve. He's probably about 60, maybe mid 60s. And so I asked him. I said, "Well, what was that like? Like you must have been really hard to go through." And he responded, "Yes, it was a very dark time in my life." And it was interesting to me that he could make a joke about it. But he said about 12 months of it was very challenging, trying to figure out how to live life again. It was very challenging for him to lose a lot of his independence. And so he was sharing this with me, and after I listened, I said, "Well, that's so interesting because you seem like the type of person that at this point, like I don't sense any bit of disappointment or upset or grief over this." And he said, and so I asked him. I said, so when did you get past it? When were you able to kind of move beyond and keep going? And he told me that he found a video of a young girl. I would think it was Make a Wish, and she was going blind, and I think she was like maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that. And she said before she went blind, she wanted to see the sunset at the Golden Gate Bridge. And he said when he saw or heard that video, he was so humbled. He saw this girl and he realized how he had been able to live 60 plus years with great eyesight and been able to do so many of the things that he wanted to do, and this girl was going to lose her eyesight before she was 10 years old. And he just talked about her attitude, and his conclusion was, after watching that, was if this girl can figure this out and can make this work in her life, I totally can. So from that point on, his perspective changed. He started to think, I can do this. And how can I do this? So he started doing new things. He started figuring out, how can I get my independence back? And a huge part of that for him was learning to walk with a walking stick and learning to take public transportation. So when I was on this flight with him, he lived in Seattle, and he was coming back from his first trip traveling on his own for fun since losing his eyesight. So it was really cool. It was really interesting. So I asked him. I said, "Well, how are you going to get home?" He's like, "Well, I'll probably take the bus, and I might go by a store and stuff like that." And I ended up saying, I mean, hey, if my truck's here, I can give you a ride if you would like one. And he was like, "Oh wow, that'd be very nice." And so I ended up giving him a ride to his house after we landed. It was such a fun experience to listen and to learn from him. Um, so a couple of the lessons, and then I have something that I want to share at the end as well, that I asked him, an interesting question. But it made me think so much of adversity and the question, how do we embrace adversity? Because it doesn't really matter. Every single one of us embraces adversity in different ways. I don't think there's any getting around it. I think for the most part, we can choose to embrace adversity on our own, or it's going to be dealt to us. You can think of those that have been raised and kind of been spoon fed a lot of things most of their life. Eventually, they have to embrace adversity. We see a lot of people like that growing up, struggling with addiction, um, not being able to live responsibly in life. And so they, a lot of times they have to hit bottom before they can kind of work their way through it. Probably all of you have heard the quote by Jim Carrey where he says something essentially along the lines of, "I wish everyone could become rich and famous at some point so that they could realize that becoming rich and famous is not the answer." So we all face adversity. Some of the things that I like to think of is I always come back to the obstacle is the way. And I used to think that the obstacle is the way just meant that, hey, you know what? This is a way that you can grow if you're willing to. Look at the obstacle as an opportunity for growth. And I think I've changed over time where I recognize that the obstacle is the path. There's not actually a better path to grow than the obstacle that's in front of you. So that's number 1. Number 2 is learning to explore the obstacle with curiosity. Ask questions in your mind. What could this lead to? I'm reminded of Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk. In the 3rd chapter, he talks about an experiment that was done in a university setting or something like that. I'm pretty sure it was in Arizona, but they tried to create this ideal, perfect climate, control it in every single way possible to grow these trees. And they found out that once they got to a certain size, the trees started just falling over and couldn't figure out why. They created all these perfect conditions. It was in an enclosed space. The soil was ideal amount of sunlight, water, everything that they could think of was perfect. What they realized over time was that the trees were too weak. The root system was too weak because they had been sheltered from the wind. So eventually, at one point, they grew to a size where their roots could not sustain the mass of their trunk and branches, and that led to them falling over much earlier than had they been out exposed to the elements. So again, kind of going along with what I'm talking about, if we look at adversity as this thing that we kind of want to dodge, we want to try and avoid it as much as possible, we are very likely selling ourselves short. I asked Steve on the plane after we'd been talking for a while. I said, you talk very positively about everything. Is there any? Do you not ever struggle with the thoughts of like, man, why can't I see? Why can't I just experience life in this way? And he said, honestly, he said, no. He said, I am so grateful for the years and years of life that I got to experience seeing things and going places and experiencing life. He said, but there is one thing. He said, my youngest granddaughter, I've never seen her face. That was when he said that, it kind of hit me. I was like, wow, I don't know. I don't know why I hadn't really thought about the ability to see someone's face, to see facial expressions, and to kind of be able to put an identity with the form of a face with the person that you know. And so that was the only thing. That was the only thing that he said, I just wish I could see my granddaughter's face. So that really struck me. But also, again, like I said, he just expressed so much gratitude for what he had been able to experience in life. Another question that came up that I thought of a month or two earlier, I had a ride from an Uber driver, and we had been talking about like a few different things. And he traveled. He loved to travel. And so he was pointing out and talking about like a few different things. And he said, it's interesting. He said, I think the only thing that makes travel fun is vision. He said, if someone's blind, I don't think they would enjoy travel because for the most part, you can be in any, decent sized city and you can go and you can eat food from different cultures. You can listen to music. You can, smell some of the smells of, and have a lot of those types of experiences. But he said, what makes traveling unique is the architecture and what it looks like, when you're in a different environment. So that question stuck with me. I thought, I wonder if he's right. And so when I was sitting next to Steve on the flight, I was like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to ask this question. He's a guy that's traveled and been able to experience, you know traveling with vision and without vision. And so I told him that experience with my Uber driver, and I said, what do you think? And his answer was really interesting to me. He said, honestly, I don't think, he said, for me, traveling is not about the exact type of experience itself. He said, traveling to me, the exciting thing about traveling is getting outside of your comfort zone. It's experiencing something new and different and a little bit foreign. And you can, vision doesn't play into that at all. So I thought that was such a fascinating answer, and I was impressed with his ability to, process that question and think that quickly. But I was really grateful for this interaction that I had with Steve and the lessons that uh, that he taught me in that conversation. I think the lasting thoughts that I would have here in, when it relates to us and our lives in practice ownership, I think so much of the time my interactions and those that I'm coaching and the dentists that I talk to, there's almost always a feeling of I'm here, but I want to get over here. There's a duality of it. I'm experiencing this, but I'm not where I want to be. I'm not who I want to be. And I think over time, I've learned to try and get rid of that a little bit, to understand this is where I'm at right now, and this is where I need to be, and this is where I want to get to, and I'm going to keep working on that. But all along the way, I'm going to be right where I need to be, and it doesn't mean that I can't shift and adapt and change. When I do shift and adapt, that's where I'll need to be at that point. More than anything else, I think this changes the way that I experience life, and I think clients as well. If you can experience practice ownership, whether it's your first 3 months, or you're in the acquisition phase, or 5 years, 10 years after, or you're getting ready to retire, um, all along the way at those points, there's this hesitant, or there's this tendency to look ahead and to say, that's where I should be, that's where I want to be. When I get there, that's when I will have made it. And I think our mind is muscle memory, like I've talked about. And so our thought processes, whatever we are strengthening as far as those thought processes, are going to continue to be there. So the more that you have thoughts like that, the more solidifying that's going to become. So even when you get somewhere, I mean, probably many of you can look at and say, at some point, your main goal was just to get into dental school. And once I get there, then I will have made it. And then in dental school, you're thinking, okay, I just got to graduate. Once I get there, then I will have made it. And then you to get a job and you think, oh man, practice ownership, that's where it's at. We can go through this cycle forever. And in a way, all we're doing is selling ourselves short of being able to really experience life in the fullest way. And I think that's what I'm trying to say about adversity as well. As we can have that similar mindset where we think, oh man, if only I didn't have this, if only I didn't have to go through this experience, then life would be great. Step back, really think. And I want you to think while you're listening to this, what's a form of adversity that you're going through right now. It could be a patient, a clinical case that's been challenging. It could be a team member that's giving a lot of resistance that makes you uncomfortable. It could be your bank account. It could be your relationship with your spouse or partner, um, other family members. It could be really anything in life. And I guess that's my point that I was making earlier. We're all going to experience adversity. There's always going to be something in our life that's not just perfect, and learning to see it differently, learning to see the obstacle is the way. This is the solution. This is the way that I'm going to grow. That is a really fun way to live life. And ultimately, you are going to enjoy growing, and you're going to grow more than if you were trying to get around it. Just like the trees that weren't exposed to the wind. If you're always trying to run away and dodge the adversity, at some point your roots are not going to be strong enough. You're going to fall, and then you're going to be forced to build a new foundation. And that's okay. If you get to that point and that's what needs to happen, then that's okay too. There's a lot of paths and ways to grow. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts and perspectives on adversity or any takeaways that you had from my conversation with Steve. As always, feel free to reach out to any of us, Derek, Matt, or Steve at thelifestylepractice.com. Check out our content and information and ways that we can work together in helping you to grow your practice at thelifestylepractice.com. Take care, guys, and we will see you in the next one. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average.